Hi, everyone. This is Matt Kinsman, Head of Content at Connectiv. Welcome to the 6 E's of Social Engagement, brought to you by Connectiv and our sister organization, Association Media and Publishing. There's some terrific examples of social media strategy in both association and B2B publishing. One example that comes to mind is American Salon from Questex, which has built close to 1 million Instagram followers as a B2B brand. That success in part prompted Questex to start shifting away from traditional search and click websites to a feed and follow content and marketing model that's patterned more like a social platform. That's something you can hear more about at Connectiv's upcoming Business Information and Media Summit, November 11th to November 13th in Hollywood, Florida. But too often we as an industry really approach social media as just another task on top of all the other things that we're doing without clear goals in mind. Many editors just repost verbatim headlines from stories that have been posted elsewhere, while many marketers just post copy and links that are ripped straight from emails. Neither is really optimized for social, and neither is really engaging. The purpose of social media isn't just to be seen, it's to engage your customer base and drive action. Today we're happy to have Anthony Schopp, co-founder and chief strategy officer for Social Driver, a leading creative agency for social media, websites, video, and brand design, and Laura Beck, marketing director at NACS, the National Association of Convenience Stores. I first saw a version of today's presentation at the 2019 AM&P annual conference earlier this year, and I was really impressed with how the speakers offered a framework for creating meaningful interactions on social media. We're very happy to have them here today. Anthony, take it away.
Thank you so much, Matt. Really want to thank you, Connectiv, and Association Media and Publishing for having us back. Worked with you all and a lot of your members in the past, and always get a lot of great ideas and feedback. So for those of you who are listening in, please feel free to add comments or questions the way Matt described. We do have an interactive section where we are going to ask you to help identify our 6 E's of engagement. So when we get to that point, we look forward to your participation. With that, I will turn to our agenda and tell you what we're going to cover today. I'm going to be taking the first part, and then you're going to hear from Laura, who's going to share her experience from NACS. We're going to start by making sure we know what we don't want to do, annoy our audience, talk about creating engaging content to motivate, and introduce a framework that we're really excited about because we think you will be able to use this, as many other association and publishing professionals have, to map out your content and make sure it aligns with your audience. Laura will be sharing her experience with the 2018 NACS show, a lot of success driving digital engagement. And then we are going to take your questions and have discussion. But throughout, feel free to chime in with any thoughts that you may have for us. I just want to say on a personal note, in addition to my role as social driver, I chair the National Digital Roundtable. And I always say to that group when we get together, we have to remember that the conspiracy theorists and the foreign adversaries know how to use digital really well. So if we want to create a great world, it is on us to make sure that we are teaching ourselves and one another how to use the best tools and tactics available. And so I think it is wonderful that you're participating today, because not only is this going to help your organization or company, but really as a society, we need to make sure we understand how to use digital marketing and communication tools so that we can get great information out there, and that the folks who are causing trouble aren't the only ones who know how to do this. So first we have to ask, how do we make sure we don't annoy our audience? I think, when we think of this is a used car salesman sort of image we have here, which I can make fun of because my good friend of mine is a used car salesman. When that attitude approaches us, whether it's in person or online, our reaction is, nope, these are the things that we don't want to do when we are engaging online. The first is we don't want to seem needy. I think all have gotten on Facebook these repeated requests for things such as Candy Crush. We don't want to overshare. When people share too much personal information, we tend to unfriend those folks, whether it's a person or a company. We don't want to be too persistent and just repeat the same things over and over. Again, it leads to a lack of engagement. We will unfollow those folks. And lastly, extraneous information such as what we had for lunch might be fun for us, but not exactly what our audience is looking for. So I think we all know these things, and yet, surprisingly, we still see organizations and people online who are using social media in a way that is not engaging to their audience. So I'm often asked, because of the work that I do, what is the secret to social media? What is really the secret sauce for organizations that do it well? And often I will point to this image of lightning striking, and I'll ask folks, what do you see here? And where is the energy coming from? And they will say what I said back when this was first introduced to me. I was an intern at a TV station, and the meteorologist asked us this question. And we said, well, of course, the energy comes from the sky, and it comes down, right? That's what it looks like is happening. But it was kind of a trick. He said, wrong. Actually, this energy, these electrons, are in the mass of the Earth. And an invisible leader bolt comes down. We can't see it. It creates a connection, and that energy is unleashed. And so lightning is really a bottom-up rather than a top-down effect. And that always stuck with me. I remember that because, when we learn something that we thought was true our whole lives isn't, we tend to remember that. But I also think it's a perfect analogy for what we're all trying to do in marketing and communications as we go into the third decade of this century. We have less than 100 days left in this decade, folks. And so we're moving forward, and we have to ask, what is the best way for us to reach our audience? It is not to sit around a table and come up with an idea and just push it in one direction. That was the old days of publishing and marketing. But in today's world, we really have to do the opposite. We have to ask, where is there already energy? And what can we do to create a channel to unleash the energy that's already there? Unleash the energy in people. Because we're more likely to see a story, we're more likely to find out about an event when it is shared by somebody that we are connected to. And maybe they text it to us, maybe they tell us over the water cooler, maybe they share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snap. But that's how we tend to get information nowadays. So we can't be successful unless we tap into the energy of others. If there's one kind of philosophical thing I hope you will remember today, it's we have to ask, how do we create a bottom-up approach? And I think that's an important question we bring, whether we're promoting our conference, our show, which you're going to hear about from Laura, or whether it's advocacy, membership, et cetera. The successful organizations today recognize that people are writing their own real-time autobiographies. So to be successful, we have to put people at the center of our campaign rather than our brand. Your member must be at the center rather than your association if you want to be successful. And I want to show you a couple quick frameworks. I know this will be recorded and you'll get access to these slides so you can dig into them more. But the first is this canvas, and I think it's really important that we remember social media isn't just about talking, but it's also about listening, engaging, and sharing. And so talking is when we create content that we want to distribute to others, and listening, of course, is when we're asking, what are they talking about, what do they care about, and how can we make sure that we're incorporating that. Those are both what we call organization-centric activities, things that you have a high level of control over. But we also have to do the type of activities that we have less control over, which is engaging. This is when we are interacting back and forth with our people, our members, our audience, and sharing. And in this case, I don't mean sharing as in you just share a link or something. How do we get others to share our content? How do we spark that word of mouth? And in order to do these, we have to empower our audience. That means we have less control. And I know all of us have had experiences where, whether it's a general counsel, a lawyer, or someone else, they're really concerned about that loss of control. But it's a reality. And I'm going to share a tool a little later that you can use to help mitigate that internally. We call it the content traffic light. The other thing I want to share on this matrix that we're looking at is that if you want to strengthen relationships with your existing audience, you're going to focus on the right side of this matrix, listening and engaging, that back and forth engagement. Think of social media not as a broadcast tool in this case, but as a tool to have one-on-one or small group conversations. If you're looking to grow and reach a new audience, it's going to be much more important for you to do the right talking, but also get others to do the sharing so that your message gets from your network out to other people's networks. Now, how do we measure the success of this? I think it starts by asking 3 key questions. What do people see? What do people say? And what do people do? And this is a sample of a framework of how you can build your success metrics into a tool that's really easy, simple, that you can communicate to senior executives or board members. What do people see? We're going to measure things like reach and impressions. What do people say? We're going to look at engagements. That might be uses of our hashtag. It might be likes. It might be shares. It might be comments. And Laura's going to tell you a little later how for NACS, they've discovered that some types of engagements are more and less common for them, and it's changed what they pay attention to. And lastly, what do people do? Do we want to get new contacts to sign up in our database? Do we want to get registrations for the show, as in Laura's case? If we use these 3 pillars as a framework, we can customize them for our own organization and our own campaign. So you can go back and use these, and feel free to follow up with me if you have follow-up questions on these, but I think it's really important to share some frameworks so that we can all better ourselves and bring some standardization in the industry. Now, as a recap of just this, the philosophical thing we have to understand before we talk about what engagement looks like is, in today's world, people are the new channel. And if we want to get great results, we have to unleash the energy in people. That's a bottom-up approach to marketing and communications rather than a top-down approach. We can facilitate it, but we can't be the only ones talking. And that leads us to engagement. I think the most important thing for publishers to hear and to learn about is the fact that if we're just posting links or content on social media, that publishing activity only has us in one of those boxes, the talking box. And to be successful, we have to listen, we have to get others to share, and to do that, we have to engage our audience. Engagement requires interaction. So I mentioned that I know we get concerns from lawyers and we get concerns from folks who are worried about what does it mean to give up control. And one of the tools we found that's really helpful when you're starting your campaign is this content traffic light. And this is a very simplified version. We ask, what is the content we should never post? What are the things that require approval to be careful about? And what do we always have approval? So this may be specific hashtags that fall into these, specific vocabulary that is key to your organization or industry that you never use, you can use carefully, or that you always use. It might be that you have an industry partner that you can always retweet. You have another competitor that you will never retweet. And then there are some accounts that it's a maybe, and we need to get that approved. So we can identify this. If you put this together, it's going to empower you or whoever your community management team is to post content and to be authentic, to do it in real time, and know what some of those guardrails are. So now that we've talked about kind of the barriers of what we don't want to do, right, through this framework, I want to go to what we call our engagement drivers, the 6 E's of engagement. And these are the strategies that we can use to reach our audience in a way that aligns with their motivations. Remember, we have to be people-centric rather than brand-centric, rather than association-centric. So to be people-centric, we have to ask, what motivates my audience? For example, what makes people look good to their friends, their colleagues, and their peers? If we answer that question, we elevate those people by making them look good to others. That requires that extrinsic reaction, right? Other people have to see it. But the flip side of that coin is our second E, empower. What can we do to make somebody feel good even if no one else sees it? For example, if one of us takes a quiz online, we're by ourselves and we get it right, we may sort of have this feeling of, yes, right? We're happy with ourselves that we got it right, even though no one else sees it. Now on the flip side, maybe we share that result so other people do see it. Okay, now we've elevated and been empowered, both. The third E is ease. What is a problem or a concern that somebody has? And how can we help ease that concern? How can we overcome it in that way? People are online to complete a mission. They might be Googling for an answer. And if we can intercept them and help them solve that problem, we are easing that burden on them. The fourth is entertain. I think we all know that we are competing not only with our direct competitors or peers, we're competing with BuzzFeed, family members, friends, the news, fun memes, because all this content is mixed together on our platforms. So we have to ask, what is going to catch and keep the attention of my audience? It doesn't mean you have to be goofy or off-brand, but it means you have to do what's authentic for you. And taking something that's kind of boring and making it visual and engaging, that can entertain. The fifth is entice. What's an offer that my audience won't want to say no to? They can't refuse. And how can we entice them with that? That might be a headline where they have to click to find the answer, right? These two companies merged, and I have to click on, well, what companies is it? Big companies in my industry merged? Who are they? Or it might be related to their status or saving money. One of the experiences that I've seen working with doctors' associations is that doctors are not necessarily as motivated by saving $100 for a conference attendance because, they probably get it paid for by their practice. They're pretty well-to-do, but they're very oriented around status. So registering early to get a VIP admission where you get a special wristband or a special ribbon on your name tag, that's actually more motivating than saving money. Other audiences are completely different. And the last E is educate. I think we all know we need to educate people, but the question is, how do we do that? And it starts with asking, what do they care about? What are they curious about? And how can we align our content, whether it's a statistic or whatever it may be, with things that they are interested in? So these are our 6 engagement drivers. And what I want to ask you to do is get your chat box open because I want to share some examples. Some are companies, some are associations. I want to ask you, what E's of engagement do you think might be represented? And some of these, it's very clearly one. Some of them, it can be many. So these are our 6 E's of engagement, our engagement drivers. And I'd love to get some audience participation as we go to our first example. In this example, I'm actually wanting to focus on the left as a starting point. This is an employee at Hilton. This is a very recent post from National Bosses Day. And I want to ask you, what E's of engagement immediately jump out at you when you see this post shared on LinkedIn? I'm looking over at our Q&A box to see if anybody can jump in with their thoughts on this. Yeah, elevate. Sorry, I had to scroll down here. Elevate, I think, I got several answers of that. And absolutely, right? Megan looks great to her peers, to her friends, to her colleagues. Who wouldn't feel good having flowers and a card? And notice she's holding up that hashtag. And I think that's really great because it shows what Hilton's doing. She's using that hashtag in the post. And so it's a really great example. And I want you to contrast that with the example on the right. Now, this is from a large recruiting firm. In fact, that firm has over 1 million followers that you can see there where it's under the name. Way more than Megan. Megan's just a person, right? But notice Megan has more likes and more comments from her small personal audience than this company with 1 million followers. And notice, it is not as enticing. It is not as entertaining. It's a button that says, I love my boss, but it doesn't really seem personalized, and it's very easy to skip over that content. And one of the things I like about this example is it illustrates to us that, you don't have to be a huge brand, with 1 million followers. Robert Half has so many followers. You can still be successful as a small organization or as an individual person by using these E's of engagement. All right, thank you for the participation, and we're going to keep it going. This is an example, I have to kind of explain it, of a Snapchat lens, one of those lenses that moves along with your face, and it has little panda ears and lights, and it's from Pepco, the electric company here in Washington, D.C. Now, Pepco did this around Zoo Lights, a big sponsorship activation that they have at our zoo here. For those of you who may have been to that, know that if you're in the D.C. area. Normally when people interact with an electric company, they're getting a bill or the power goes out. Those are not good experiences. And thousands of people used this Snapchat lens and they're smiling and they're having a good time, and Pepco's in the corner. And so you can see that that's not something that happens too often for a utility. What ease of engagement do you think jump out here? Yeah, I see entertain, which I think is absolutely true. It's fun to participate. It's fun to see it. Empower, absolutely. It gives you an opportunity to jump in and do something yourself. Absolutely. I think that these are great. And in fact, I would even say might be a little enticing if you're there and you see it, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of want to do it yourself. Looks something fun we might want to play around with. And if you didn't know that Pepco is the sponsor of Zoo Life, it might even educate you about that. So I think that it's a great example. This is an association, American Chemical Society. This is a sponsored post that says, join ACS before the socks are gone. For science geeks, that is a great joke. What E of engagement do you think this might relate to? So I see entice, absolutely. They're going to be gone, right? So they're entertain, absolutely, Kara, because that's a joke that, wouldn't work for every single person. Not everybody would get that joke, but they know their target audience, so it is entertaining. They love that. And I just thought this is a really cool example for an association that you don't necessarily expect to be really fun and to be really clever. So great. Your participation is awesome. I'm loving this. Here's an example from the American Red Cross of a water safety quiz about, do you know how to swim? That's at the top. You can see at the bottom left, you passed and you're ready for the Olympics. And then we can see on the right there, it gives you an opportunity to share a link with your followers. And in that thing, you may have a hard time reading it depending on how big your screen is, it says, I passed. I'm ready for the Olympics. Do you know how to swim? And so I'm seeing some responses come through that this is educating. Absolutely. A great way to educate, let people participate and interact with it. I'm seeing elevate. Absolutely, because you're now telling people that you won. I'm seeing empower. You guys got it. I'm empowered to participate in the quiz, and I feel good. Yeah, I got the answer right. Only 56% of the people get it right, it says, so that makes me feel good. And then I'm elevated because I get to tell others about that. I always think it's kind of the introvert and the extrovert side. The introvert wants to feel empowered whether anybody knows it or not. The extrovert, like me, wants to share the answer so that we get a little pat on the back and people see how smart we are, right? So absolutely. Now, in this example, this is from Instagram. And it's an Instagram story. And you can see on the left there's a question here asking, do you exercise for at least 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times per week? It says if you answered yes, you're changing your brain's anatomy. And then on the right, this is from TED. It's sending us to a TED Talk where we can learn more. And I thought this was really relevant, especially for publishers thinking about how do you take a tool like Instagram Stories and drive people to your content. And so it looks like I'm seeing, and I'm having a hard time seeing which ones were for the last one, this one, but I'm seeing empower, elevate, educate. Absolutely. I think this is extremely educational. I think it's empowering because you're participating in that quiz. And what a great way to get people to drive to learn more about this. This is kind of interesting. Exercise is going to actually change your brain's function. Go forward and watch this. I kind of want to watch this TED Talk now. And so you can get sucked into those and just want to keep watching them. In terms of a different platform, I want to show you something from Pinterest. One of the things we see is that certain audiences really oversample on Pinterest. Women particularly oversample. Moms really oversample is a subset of women. People planning weddings, etc. And this is an example from the American Academy of Family Physicians. They have a consumer-facing brand called familydoctor.org. And it's a website. They have social media channels. In this case, they are using Pinterest to get their information out to more audiences, and they're seeing success with other Pinterest users repinning their content. This particular example, you guys are nailing it. It's educational. It's telling us about the fever and what temperature you need to bring an infant or a child to the doctor. Because, again, a lot of their information takes you to when should you go see your doctor, when should you call your doctor. And it's really helpful information. And it's also just important to see how they have identified that their target audience, women make the majority of healthcare decisions, and so targeting a platform where women are oversampled makes a lot of sense. I also see empower and ease coming through, and absolutely, it makes it easy to share the content and easy to get to this information. That takes you to their website where you can dive in more, but it gets you right to that part of the website. And I think it's empowering for people to have more information and be able to distribute that to their friends. You guys are rocking it. This is from DC Bike Ride. 3 reasons you should register for the bike ride. Right now, you can see kind of fun with some emoji in there, and it's talking about 20% off registration. The offer ends on May 9th. What does that trigger for us when we hear this offer is ending? It says register before it's too late. Yeah, you got it. Madeline, entice, Rachel, entice. Entice is absolutely right. They have figured out a way to be enticing. I think the imagery is very entertaining. It's pretty. It's something that catches our attention, the use of emoji here. So you guys got it. Just a couple more examples, and then I'm going to show you a framework you can use with this tool. What company do you think this is promoting? Take a look at this and tell me, what company do you think this advertising is for? Because we actually don't see the company name. Yeah, you got it. Several of you guessing. MailChimp. What E of engagement do you think this might be? Waiting for some. Yep, it's entertaining, absolutely. Totally entertaining. And I'd say kind of a little empowering too, because there's something funny about when you see MailShrimp, JailBlimp, MailChimp. I got it, right? You've just solved the problem in your head. And so, but absolutely it's entertaining. And I just think it's a fun example that caught my attention. This is from the American Heart Association's Voices for Healthy Kids. And I really like how this is an advocacy example where they're asking their followers to tag decision makers, policy makers, to keep physical education in school. I'm asking you to tag your member of Congress. What does that do to you? What E is that when I'm asking you to tag somebody like a member of Congress that you care about? Absolutely, Kelsey. It's empower. It's putting you in the driver's seat. It's allowing you the opportunity to help advance this policy. Elevate, I think that's right too, because you're standing up as a champion. So you guys have a great command of this. I'm loving it. I have last example. This is from the Trevor Project. It's an organization. The post is from the Trevor Project. It's a great nonprofit that is helping to solve the LGBTQ youth suicide problem by it's a phone line, chat line, text line for youth in crisis. And one of the things that I saw here was that another company that does genetic testing called Genomind mentioned the Trevor Project as one of 5 great resources you should know on their blog. Well, I dug into this and talked to the folks. Without Genomind even knowing it, the Trevor Project saw this, probably showed up in a Google alert, and then they tagged Genomind and thanked them. Well, the Trevor Project has a lot more followers than Genomind. So this was a good strategy, whether they meant to do it or not. By them elevating the Trevor Project, Genomind got the Trevor Project to engage with them and share it with all their followers, therefore making Genomind look really good and drive some traffic to that Genomind blog. And as publishers, I want you to think about this, because where is there an opportunity in the content you're publishing to make other people look good, whether that's a member of yours, an expert in your community, another organization you're citing? Are you mentioning them in the article but maybe not tagging them on Twitter so that they see it, not tagging them on LinkedIn? You're missing an opportunity to elevate them in that case, and therefore missing an opportunity for someone to then share your content and drive more people back to it. That simple tactic alone can drive a ton of web traffic and a ton of engagement. So to wrap up our 6 E's, I wanted to share the engagement drivers as sort of a framework, and you can see here some key questions for each one and just some kind of quick examples on the right. This is something that I recommend you whiteboard out, or you could print out and do a worksheet with your team. And when you're planning for your conference or your advocacy campaign, go through and ask these questions. Well, what problems are my members trying to solve? What concerns do they have? Can we ease that concern? What makes them look good to peers and colleagues? What makes them look important? Oh, well, we can elevate them to do that. And as you go through, you will find that this gives you a structure to brainstorm a ton of activity, a ton of tactics, a ton of content ideas. You don't have to use them all, but it really collects a lot, and then you can start to build that into your strategy. So I just want to pause real quick. Any questions about the 6 E's before we move on to Laura, because she has some great information to share about the 2018 NACS show. Just looking over to see, a few more seconds. Okay, I don't think we have any pressing questions. So I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to keep an eye on the comments because I can see them, but I don't think Laura can. So thanks for telling me that, Laura. And I'm going to move forward here. And Laura, would love to turn it over to you and have you talk to us a little bit about the 2018 NACS show.
Okay, thanks, Anthony, and thanks for sharing some of those engagement tactics and tips with us. So I'm going to share some just insight and some tips that I found from the association side for creating engagement on social channels. For a little bit of background, I work for NACS, the association dedicated to advancing convenience and fuel retailing, and the examples will come from our large show called the NACS show. It brings together roughly 24,000 industry stakeholders from around the world. The expo is a little larger than 420,000 square feet, and we have more than 50 education sessions. So that gives you a little bit of background on kind of the scale of event that I'm talking about for my examples, and just that social is one of the many channels we use. We use an integrated marketing communications campaign, and we try to make sure that our content matches together through all of those channels, and social is one of them, the one that I'll be covering today. And specifically for our audience, this focuses on retailers, and those are individuals that own and operate convenience stores around the world. So my first tip, if you could go forward, thanks, Anthony. My first tip is to talk about creating a strategic planning process. So it's very important when you're tackling something like social across many different platforms and you have many things to say, that you really come up with a strategic plan first. And it starts with knowing your goals and desired outcomes, and then strategizing and organizing your content based on those goals. So for us, we worked with Social Driver to create kind of this Excel spreadsheet. We have it by week and month. And then within that spreadsheet, we have kind of the date the post or content would go out, what platform it goes out on, and kind of the copy, any graphics, any links. And what you can see that's cut off, you can include engagement drivers on your chart as well. And this really will help you kind of define the ease of engagement and come up with meaningful content that connects back to them. It goes back to Anthony's last slide where he showed you questions to ask yourself, and then different ways that you can create content that ties back to each E, and then you can have it all organized in a document like this. And for us, it was a simple way to kind of share content, share changes, be able to like mark things as approved if you have an internal approval process. So the main takeaway is however you choose to organize it, make sure that you are going through some type of strategic planning process. And then my next tip is the importance of visual content. So studies have shown that people can recall 65% of visual content that they see almost 3 days later. That's in comparison to just 10% of written content. So below are 3 examples of using images with our content. And this really goes back to the 3 E's of entertain, educate, and empower. We found that our posts work best if we put people at the center. People love to see themselves and share themselves and tell other people that they're featured on social. So we found that we get the most engagement, and this really helps turn our audience into the channel because they start sharing it with their networks and they start talking about it, and they might have some people in their network that we're not reaching. And there are different ways you can do this. Here I just showed 3 static images, but you can also use testimonials. You can put those in kind of like a designed graphic, so they're not just your basic text, but they are more of an image. You can do explainer videos. Those are short snippets and sometimes animated. And then you can have just your simple animation, like little snippets of information. And then you can also use some polls and quizzes to help people get engaged. And then next, also tied to visual content, if you don't have if you don't want to put just regular photos up, we did something with Social Driver that kind of focused more on the location. So that's the animated image at the top, which shows that we were in Las Vegas in 2018. And with the headline, Growing Your Business is just around the corner, just a little bit of information, and then they would read more, click through to find out more about the NACS show. This focuses more on people who may not be as familiar with the show and have that personal connection. So it talks a little bit about where it is, and that the goal is to help grow their business. And then the example on the bottom right is a little more for the audience that already knows us, and they're hopefully likely registering for the show, and it uses specific imagery from the previous show, and the copy reflects that they're familiar with us, and it's saying that the NACS show is back and we hope to see them there. And then the next one is the importance of social presence. So this really goes back to awareness and impressions, and it's important to get eyes on your content. That's the first step to success. So in the image to the left here is something called the loyalty loop that Social Driver uses. And basically the number one is what we're focusing on, which is reaching out for the first time, and then the thought is to keep them in the loop all the way around to conversions. So basically the first step is awareness. You want to get your content out there, and then the more content you push out there and the more impressions and people that you get in front of, the more engagement will come, and that will lead to your conversion. So I would say for us, engagement doesn't always come in the form of comments, which everybody usually likes to see that people are commenting on your posts on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. But I wouldn't be discouraged if you don't see that type of engagement, because for us, we have a lack of kind of comments on all of our platforms, but we see a large amount of sharing, liking, and that later we kind of use a system of like what went out in a specific time frame to see who engaged with what over multiple communications, and we found that they are engaging by viewing our social presence and then maybe going back to an email that we sent earlier that week to actually register for something, because our emails have unique URLs in them and they make them very easy for someone to register. So I wouldn't be so discouraged if you don't see the engagement in terms of like actually being able to view it, because the impressions are almost equally as important, especially in our case. And then my next one is how to maximize social media ad spend. So for those of you that have a budget around your social strategy, there are several ways that you can use your budget to kind of maximize your reach on social. These are a few ways that at NACS we have used our budget to help grow our social presence. So this all goes back to what are your goals and anticipated outcomes. So what works for us may not necessarily work for you, and you'll have to kind of make sure you're monitoring along the way to make sure what's working and not working for you, and then reallocating your funds appropriately. But for us, we found that email list matching works. So this is where you, specifically on Facebook, you can upload a email list, and then you can do direct matching with ads. So that's basically everyone that they match from your list gets served up an ad that you tell them to serve. And the second one is website retargeting. This is where you can get a little more specific with segments. You can retarget people who visit a certain place on your website. So it could be that they just visit your event landing page, or you could get more detailed to where they're an abandoned cart. So they started your registration process, they maybe didn't finish, so you want to serve them up an ad that says, hey, we know that you started the reg process. Can you come back and finish it, or can we help you with finishing your registration? Just to give them that reminder and hopefully convert. And then there's also lookalike targeting. So this is similar to email list matching, and where you'd upload an email list, and then instead of a direct ad serve, it would find people like people on the list that you uploaded, and then it would serve ads to those individuals. This is a really great one if you're looking to grow your audience, because it might find people that you don't necessarily have already in your database. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, it's always great to monitor everything, and you need to reallocate accordingly. And this gets into, when I'm saying monitoring, that it's really important to measure your content. Can you go forward, Anthony? Perfect. So this is about measurement. So everything you want to do, you want to be monitoring. So there are plenty of ways you can measure engagement. That's through comments, through likes, through shares, through conversions. There are several ways on different platforms that you can be monitoring. Here at NACS, we use UTM codes on all of our links. So that works with our Google Analytics, and we can kind of track the sources that are coming to our website and where they're coming from. And we get pretty detailed as to which social channel they came from. So that's using a UTM code. You can also use other tracking programs. I know some of the ones that you can use, like Hootsuite, has a little bit of tracking built in. I'm not as familiar with other platforms, but I'm sure there are several. I mentioned Google Analytics, which is something we use that works with our website as well. And then you can also just get really basic and use the platform itself. Most platforms give you at least a decent amount of information in terms of likes, shares, comments, all of that basic stuff that you can be tracking. And then you want to make sure that you're putting that back in your master document so you can over time see what is working and what isn't working. And you might find that some posts are more engaging than others, and that might help drive your content across your other channels like emails, website, digital ads, things like that. At NACS, once we started tracking everything, we have found that LinkedIn didn't really work for us, so we kind of pulled a lot of our spend from there and a lot of our effort and targeted more Facebook. That seemed to be the channel that works best with our audience. And we found that if you kind of think that's interesting because we're doing business marketing and wouldn't use LinkedIn because you're talking, to businesses, but we found that most people are engaging on off-work time, so they must be on their Facebook when they're not at work, and they're seeing our content. And then, like I mentioned before, over a time period, we can see who's engaged with what, and then when their registrations came in, so we can kind of tie back to that. The social piece had a little piece of the puzzle in getting someone to register for our event. And if you move forward one more slide, Anthony. We also tracked through the See, Say, and Do kind of grid that Anthony talked about. So seeing was all about getting people to see your content and drive awareness. So for us in 2018, we saw, you can see the large number there, for our total impressions, and then also our hashtag impressions, specifically hashtag NACSShow. This just shows in a quick snippet how many people saw our content over the period of the campaign, which is obviously a great number for us. And then when you move on to say, this is if people reacted to our content and we can gauge whether it captured their attention or not and got them to do something. This isn't necessarily conversions. We'll talk about that when they actually did something, but this is just engaging with us in some way other than actually registering. And there were 23,086 owned engagements, which gave us a rate of 1.4%. The industry average for that is 0.81%, so we were well above average there. And then the one that everybody kind of aspires to have is the do measurement, because you want people to actually convert and register or attend or buy something. And for us, we had 130 purchase conversions through ads when I talked about using your ad spend. And this we could direct back to clicking an ad and actually registering. So that was a 15.8% conversion rate. The industry average is 2.38, so that was well above average. And for us, that showed that putting money into social media advertising was something that we wanted to continue doing because we were seeing the ROI. Again, if you're not seeing the ROI, you might pull back on your ads and just do more of your organic posting, and that's okay too. What works for someone doesn't always work for someone else. So like Anthony said, this is a great way to kind of do top level of what works and what doesn't work. And after tracking everything and the numbers came in at the end of last year's show, we had a record show, and we increased our retailers, also known as buyers that I talked about, those individuals that own and operate a convenience store, by 7% that year, and we could attribute some of that to social because through our measurement we could see that people were connecting on social, and it helped us connect with people we didn't necessarily have on our database by doing those lookalike audiences, and that all helped us reach our goal of having a record show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. And I'll just conclude with just 3 key takeaways, and then we'd love to answer your questions if you want to chat those or use audio. But the first is you have to put people at the center rather than your brand or your association. That is definitely a theme we see across the most successful campaigns using digital and social channels. Part of doing that is engaging with people by figuring out what motivates them, what will entice them, what will elevate them, what will empower them. It's going to be different for each audience. And so you have to identify that and then use the different ease of engagement to align with those motivations. And remember, don't just talk, but listen, engage, and share. And by doing that, you can really achieve that result we're looking for. We're in a world now where it's like that lightning strike I showed you. Top down is not the way it works anymore. The way the world works is bottom up. We have to identify where there's already energy and create a channel to unleash the energy from our people that's already there. And I think you can see how the 2018 NACS show did that, having their record attendance, especially within that coveted segment that they were trying to grow. And you can see some other examples of that through the ease of engagement tactics that we went through and that you all did such a great job on the quiz. So with that, would love to answer any questions you have or hear any comments that you might have. You can raise your hand. I think there's a button to do that, or you can type your questions if you have any.
Exactly. Folks, you've got 2 ways to ask questions. You can unmute your line by hitting *7 on your phone, or you can submit your question in the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. You can select Broadcast to All or Broadcast to Presenters, or you can send it directly to Anthony, and he can read it out loud to the audience.
Okay, and I'm seeing a question come in. One is there a limit to the number of posts you post at a conference? And Laura, maybe you want to chime in about how you all have done that.
I would say yes, that kind of you don't want to be annoying. I would say that for us, we do kind of the scheduled posts that we would do before we even arrive on site and have a plan. Then you also have some of those kind of like alerts that you would put out last minute on site, and that's okay as well. You definitely want to be present, though, not only for the people that are attending your event on site and kind of giving them information about what's going on, but you also want to tell those that are back in the office what's going on, because you want them to have a little bit of that fear of missing out, in hopes that next time your event comes around that they'll remember that they were seeing your content pushed out while you were there, and that they'll actually be there in person next time. So I don't know if there's like an actual number that I would give you. I would just say don't border on the line of being annoying, but be relevant and give content out as it's necessary.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I'll add to that, you're going to want to look at each platform differently. So Twitter, for example, probably has the shortest shelf life of content. And it's really common to live tweet specific sessions, and Twitter's kind of like this river. It just sort of flows by. You're probably tomorrow not going to see a lot of tweets from yesterday unless somebody tags you in it. And so you see more of that. Let me say on the opposite end of the spectrum is LinkedIn. It's really common that you might post great content on LinkedIn, a post, whether it's short or long form. You may see that you're getting likes and comments on that a week later. Well, why is that? LinkedIn prioritizes content that it thinks people will like. So even if they don't log in every day, they may be shown a post from your organization or a person who's your membership a week later, and they may comment or like it. So keeping that in mind, you're going to post different types of content on different platforms depending on the length of the shelf life. Just a last quick example is on Instagram. You may want to use Instagram stories to share live content, or also to curate content of others who tag your organization and mention your hashtag. And then you can actually save those as moments and include them in a highlights section on your Instagram account so that those live on into the future. And we can go deep into that. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Just did a big training for Goodwill leaders across the United States for each of the local Goodwills on that. And I think it's a really great strategy for live events to showcase the success throughout the year in a longer tail fashion. We had another question about listening and engaging and how that's difficult because of your approval process. And I sure feel you on that because I know a lot of organizations deal with that. I think one way to start is the traffic light and identifying what content you can get pre-approved in advance, language that you can just tweak slightly but use during conference sessions. You can get quotes and key insights from people even before the session and queue those up to post during the conference sessions. So those are some strategies you can use. But the other thing I think you have to do is just slowly work on changing the culture in the organization. Because if you are going through 8 people to approve a tweet as if it's a press release coming from the State Department or something, you're not going to be able to be successful in real time. And this is a real-time platform. I sometimes say it's, imagine if you were at a happy hour or a cocktail party and you had to have your boss on the phone and run everything you said by that person. Well, it'd be pretty weird. You'd be standing in a corner by yourself pretty soon, and you're going to end up isolated on social media and ignored if you don't incorporate real-world practices. But you can't do it all overnight, so the content traffic light can work. The pre-planned content for things that make sense can work, and then just slowly trying to get people to engage a little differently. A friend of mine who works for an association told me his member companies, which are publicly traded, have a really hard time getting content approved in time, so they'll send it to him. The association will post it, and they got the approval at the member companies that they can always retweet something from the association. So they can't post it directly. They can write it, send it to him, he can tweet it, they can retweet it. So sometimes some creative workarounds can be helpful. We have a question from Jeff about the best practice on the percentage of posts. Oh, you're welcome, Tara. Thanks for thanking me. The best practice on what percentage of posts should be promoting or marketing style, 25% or less. And I think that's right. I actually often tell clients that probably a quarter or less of your content, especially on a very engaging platform like Twitter, should be you in the talking box. And then you should be spending a lot more time in the other areas. So at a conference, replying to people saying, glad you got something out of that session, way to go, retweeting them with a comment, even if that comment's just a, or a quote tweet, even if it's just a thumbs up, seeing what other people are saying on LinkedIn and responding to them, thanking them, sending direct messages to them. A lot of this is under the surface. I won't know you're doing it just by following your account because it may be direct messages or things that don't show up. But a lot more of your effort should go into that. I think nowadays we have to think of social media as not just a megaphone to talk to the world, but a tool that allows us to have individual and small group conversations with the people who matter most to us. And I know that's a different mentality, especially coming from a publishing world, right? Where I'm a former newspaper editor and reporter, and I know that, we spend all of our time developing content that would be mass distributed. Well, we can't take that same mentality to social media for all of our content. For a little bit, maybe it's okay, but we have to think of this as actual conversations. Laura, would you add anything on that for Jeff's question?
I think kind of you touched on creating that personal engagement because people remember that. So if you take the time to talk directly to them, if they took the time to kind of share something about your company or your event, that you could take the time to build that relationship, and then you'll find that they might become one of your champions and, retweet or comment or share your content later, and then they're sharing it to their whole audience, and then you're building this kind of online community.
I think that's an excellent point, and I'd say one way you can sort of experiment even is people may not be tagging your organization, but what if you just search for your organization's web address, whatever.org, see who is sharing links to your website that you may not know about because they're not tagging you, and maybe they're promoting your content or your articles or your conference, and you can say, thanks for sharing that, or here's another resource you might like. That's a way that you can have those one-on-one conversations that Laura's talking about because, to have those conversations, you have to know who to have them with. And you can do the social matching that Laura talked about to identify where your people are on social. And you can also just listen for people talking about your industry using your keywords, because they may not all be doing an app mention or tagging you on LinkedIn or using the right language in that way, but they're still out there sometimes. I think we have time. If there's one more question, be happy to take it. And otherwise, we can just wrap up. And thank you. I know Laura and I are both available if you want to reach out to us. Our emails are at the beginning of the slide deck, and Laura's is just lbeck@convenience.org, and I'm Anthony@socialdriver.com. And I always love these discussions. I think we've made the world a little better today by teaching great folks how to do some of these things, so that the conspiracy theorists and the foreign adversaries aren't the only ones that know how to engage people successfully, because we know they sure do. And we want to make sure that great organizations like yours are also using digital to its fullest. So we really appreciate your participation.
Well, Anthony and Laura, thank you for speaking today. You guys did a terrific job, and you've been troopers throughout this process, so it's a pleasure to have you. For our attendees, we are going to be sending a copy of the deck and a video link so you can see a replay of this presentation that will be headed out shortly. And as they said, you can follow up directly with Anthony and Laura for your questions. Before we leave you today, just want to hopefully educate, entice, and engage you on some upcoming activities with Connectiv. These are activities that are also open to members of AM&P. On October 24th, we're going to be hosting a webinar on the Neal Award. These are the editorial awards for Connectiv. We like to call them the Pulitzer Prize of B2B media, just showing you what you need to know about the process and about the awards themselves. On October 31st, we're going to be having the Connectiv Revenue Council meeting in New York City. This brings together anyone with ownership of revenue. So this can be chief revenue officers, publishers, salespeople. We're talking about driving revenue across things from advertising to subscriptions to events to data. It's a pretty wide-ranging conversation, and we break off into non-competitive flights. So you will not be in a group with a competitor. You'll be with your peers who you can talk to and learn from. We'll be hosting the Revenue Council meeting November 1st in Chicago as well. On November 11th and November 13th, we have our Business Information and Media Summit in Hollywood, Florida. This is one of our biggest events of the year. November 21st, webinar on monetizing podcasts. Can it be done? Almost everyone is doing a podcast these days. Almost no one is making money on it. We're going to have a few examples of people who are doing it and talk a little bit about what people see as the emerging revenue models for podcasts going forward. Finally, we're going to be having the Connectiv Digital Media Council meeting December 3rd in Chicago, December 5th in New York City. And again, this is a wide-ranging council. It includes digital media people, marketers, editors, anyone who's really playing in the digital space, talking about strategy and execution. And you're welcome to have a peer-to-peer conversation with that today. This concludes the webinar. Thanks again to our speakers. Thanks again to our attendees for joining us today. We will follow up soon.